Hi everyone, I'm Gerald. I'm a licensed engineer here in the Philippines and currently a student at UAUC in their Masters of Business Administration program. In the past, I've read hundreds of personal finance and self development books, and I've attended several career and investing seminars and workshops. And during this time, I've applied everything I learned and knew what works and what doesn't work when it comes to adulting. In this video, I will show you how to know your FIRE number in order to retire early and comfortably. When I started working, there was a lot of hype about retiring early, living the good life, things like that. However, as time went on, I realized that the thought of retiring early is quite boring, and as I imagine, I won't be working on anything in the next few immediate years. However, later on, I learned the concept of FIRE, which stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early, and it is a movement or a principle that focuses on being financially independent and knowing how much you need before you retire. Of course, in this channel, we don't take the retirement for portion at face value because retiring without doing anything is quite boring, but instead, the beauty of this concept is flexibility. So, as soon as you know the age you can retire and how much you need in order to live more freely and comfortably, from there you can begin on things that matter most to you. For example, you can start traveling around the world, you can build a business that really excites you, and you can work on pro bono on things that are really close to your heart. The FIRE number is the amount of money you need to have invested in order to live off those returns and quit working. So, there are a lot of ways to compute this FIRE number, and some people say just multiply your annual expenses by 25. Some people say multiply your annual expenses by 50. But for me, I want to be as prepared as possible because 50 years down the road, we don't want to be shocked about unplanned expenses. So I'll teach you on how to compute it based on your ideal lifestyle. So let me show you this template that I got from the web, and I've modified it and optimized it in a way that it's more simple and it's not too hard for ourselves to tweak on the data in this FIRE template. So the way to use this FIRE template is very straightforward. So first is you have to put in your current age. So for example, you start studying in college at 18 and you need 4 years in order to graduate, then we can start at 22 years old. I think that's a conservative value. Your existing net worth, ideally, you should convert all of your materials like phone, laptop, bags. If you have a guitar, if you have material items that you have, then you should check the amount when you could sell it and then make it to a monetary value and put in the value that you have under existing net worth. For existing annual income, we get an average value of 20,000 per month times 14 because of the 13th month pay and the mid-year bonuses that some companies give out to their employees. So I think this is an average value of 20,000 pesos. For annual salary increase, it depends on your company. I know that it fluctuates very much, but for this example, let's say 4% would be a good annual salary increase in my opinion. Inflation, the historical average inflation of the Philippines is 4%, so let's stay at that. And for target retirement age, this is the value that we can tweak later on, but for this purposes, let's set it at 50 years old. In this portion, under investment vehicles, I will let you know more about this in the next videos, but the most basic investment that we could have in the Philippine setting is the Philippine stock market. So let's say it has an 8% yield, which is pretty much realistic in the past couple of years. That means that if you invested 10,000 pesos this year in the Philippine stock market, it will grow by 8% the next year, and then 8% the year after, and then 8% 2 years after. So that's what this net yield means. So in this example, we will allocate all of our money, 100%, to the Philippine stock market as an investment. So we just have to plug in the values that we want into these monthly expenses and non-recurring expenses. So for our first year, 23 years old, we should have a realistic value of what we are currently living. For example, I live in an apartment that costs 3,000 pesos per month, then I would plug in 3,000 pesos here. And then the next year, the reason why it's 3,120 is because of the inflation of 4%. So for utilities, during my first year, let's say I spend just 1,000 pesos per month for both electricity and water, then I just put it at that 1,000 pesos. For food, it depends on you, but for me, as in this example, let's say I spend 100 pesos per meal, then I spend a total of 300 pesos per day for 3 meals, and then a month I would spend a total of 9,000 pesos. For clothing, it depends on you as well, but for me, I would make it an average of 1,000 pesos per month. For education, I am pretty frugal, so I would opt to leverage free online courses in the internet, like YouTube videos, free code camp, any resources that are free over the web. So I would let it as zero at this point, but this could change later on. For entertainment, since I don't do much entertainment myself because I focus on learning at this early stage of my life, so I would maybe set it as 1,000 pesos for, you know, eating out every now and then, or having a massage, or having some, you know, discretionary expenses. For transportation, let's say I'm pretty frugal, so I would only spend 12 pesos for fare one way, and then 12 pesos the other way, so that's 12 times 2, and then for 30 days I would only spend 720 pesos per month. For hospital and medicine, I would be pretty much more not that too conservative here, so I would spend 2,000 pesos budget for hospital and medicine per month. For furniture, since I only live alone, I wouldn't spend much for furniture, but if there are any more additional expenses, then I would adjust this in the future. For electronics, we could um, transfer it to the non-recurring expenses, since this is not too much and I only use my phone and laptop for, vlogging, for things that I need to work in, and I would simply set it as 0 peso. For vacation, I would want to have as much vacation as possible, but I would also want to save money as possible. So I would make it to a more conservative value, like 2,000 pesos. I think that's enough. So 2,000 pesos per month is 24,000 pesos per year. And I would be able to vacate to do a vacation myself in another country or in the Philippines, whichever I would prefer at that time, once a year, I think. So this is not too much of an amount. For jewelry, I don't own much jewelry myself, so I'd leave it at 0 peso. In this case, my total expenses is 19,720 pesos, and my non-recurring expenses for this example, let's say I want to own a house at 50, or let's say 30 years old, then I would set it at 30 years old there, right? Let's say I want to build a house that's worth 3 million at 30 years old. And for car and electronics, I would intend to replace my phone every 10 years and my laptop every 20 years. So we can adjust that, add those values. The phone that I want to purchase is the flagship phone, so I'll replace that every 10 years. And then a laptop every 20 years. So 150,000 for both of them. And then another phone. So this 150,000 is for both the phone and the laptop. Okay. So I would stop it at 62 years old because for the laptop, because I don't intend to use heavy much work in a laptop when I reach 60 years old. So maybe just I'll just replace my phone every 10 years starting at 62 years old. So take note that I didn't include the inflation rate here since we want it to be as simple at this moment. But if you want to be more accurate, then feel free to include the inflation rate during your computation of the non-recurring expenses. So as you can see, I want to live as long as possible, so I have repeated the 50,000 pesos for the phone replacement up until 113 years old. For wedding, let's say I will get married at 30 years old. I plan to have a budget of 100,000 pesos in this example. So what you want to notice here is that at age 30, so let's say you earn 280,000 pesos starting at age 23, right? So you earn that amount of money and then it increases by 4% at 24 years old. So 280,000 pesos, your annual income less your expenses, which is 236,640 pesos for the whole year. That makes you 54,560 net in savings, right? And if you keep grinding up until 30 years old, then you would save an amount of 542,725, right? Which is more than enough. And if you buy a house at that time, let's say worth 3 million, and then you get married with a 100,000 pesos budget, then you will have a negative net worth, which is not what we want. This means that you will get into debt of 2,442,059. So that's when you need to optimize your expenses or optimize your income, right? So you can delay buying a house or delay your wedding or increase your income instead. So I think 30 years old is an early age to have a house. Maybe we can move it to 40 years old. So we'll buy a house at 40 years old worth 3 million. And then 100,000 for the wedding. I think that's fine. 30 years old would be fine for a wedding. So we moved it to 40 years old. Now at 41 years old, you'll have again a negative net worth. So in this case, you can move again your plan to buy a house, or you can increase your income instead, which is I think more I think better than delaying your plan to buy a house again. So you started at 280,000 pesos per year. Of course, if you are quite ambitious yourself, then you can get promoted in your current role at 30 years old, and let's say you earn 50,000 per year. So that would total to 600,000 pesos per year. Now, if we go to 41 years old, you will no longer have a negative net worth, but instead, you have a 6 million net worth at 40 years old, and then less the house that you bought at that time, you will still have more than 4 million at 41 years old, which is enough to live comfortably. But again, we have to look at the larger scale. So if you're going to retire at 50 years old, then you will no longer have money to serve as your income starting at 51 years old, but you can live up until 96 years old, right? So at 95 years old, you will still have 2 million in your bank, but at 96 years old, you will have a negative net worth. I think that's fine if you don't intend to live up until, let's say, 115 years old. But if you want to maximize your life, then you may want to again increase your income. So let's say you get promoted again at age 40, or you continue working up until 55. So if we change the target retirement age to 55, then at age 115 years old, you will still have a positive net worth, which is what we want. And then you can feel free to add more expenses depending on the ideal lifestyle that you have. Like for apartment, since you bought a house at age 40 that's worth 3 million, you can maybe rent a house um, near your workplace, and then rent this 3 million house for others, so that balances out your expenses for rent and the income that you gain from the rent from other people, right? You can also increase the amount that you can budget for your wedding, or increase the amount for your hospital bills, for your medicine expenses, for vacation, things like that. But the important thing is you should not have a negative net worth on this D column, because otherwise you will fall into debt at that time, right? Also, this 8% net yield is an average, so it could go lower to 4%, it could go higher to 12%, but 8% is the average net yield that we have in the Philippine stock market. So feel free to navigate on this template, and you can also see it as a graphical interface in the net worth graph. So this just means that when the graph is pointing upward from age 30 years old to 120 years old, you will not fall into debt because your net worth would be all positive, right? So that is the important thing. You should not have a negative net worth at any point in time in the future. Yeah, so again, as I mentioned, if you want to maximize the expenses, since you would be earning much around 60 100 million at around age 84 85, then you might as well add some more expenses here, maybe buy a new house or buy a new car, or increase your expenses for vacation. So that gives you the the best amount that you want in order to live comfortably in the future. So your FAR number would be the sum of the income that you receive from your age at this point up until the age that you intend to retire, which is 28,798,569, which is the sum of all of these values. If you have any recommendations about what I should talk about next, let me know in the comment section, and subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon to notify you as soon as I upload a new video.